What's good, ladies and gentlemen? What is good? It's your boy Cheats, and this is a very, very special edition of the Black Baseball Mixtape podcast. I am so excited about today's guest, which is award-winning author, journalist, producer Howard Bryant. And I've talked to him a couple times, but I am so ecstatic to talk to him today. His latest book, his 11th book, is absolutely fantastic. I got it right here beside me, and you'd be afraid to see how many notes I've written up in this thing. It is Kings and Pawns, Jackie Robinson, Paul Robeson in America. Before we bring Howard Bryant on, I do have to do our little housekeeping, which is a special shout out to our partners, as always. The Players Alliance, first and foremost. They've been rocking with us since the very beginning. Make sure you check out the TPA and everything the Players Alliance are doing. Nonprofit established by players to share, grow the game with accessibility and underserved communities. Make sure you check out Numbers Game scorecards. I got to ask Howard Bryant if he scores games. He seems like the type that scores games while watching a baseball game, but we will definitely ask him about that. And last but not least, minority prospects. From grassroots level to high school to college, Minority Prospects tracks all of the African-American minority baseball and softball players, and they are doing amazing, amazing work. So with no further ado, I am honored to bring in award-winning author, journalist, producer, Howard Bryant. HB, welcome back to the mixtape, my friend.
Good to be back. How you doing?
I'm excited. I'm going to start with the easy softball. Do you score games when you're watching baseball games?
Of course I score games.
Is there any other way to watch it?
How do you watch a baseball game if you're not keeping score? I mean, it's very, very difficult to watch a game. And I mean, especially one professionally. I mean, I'm a professional, so of course I score the game. When I'm in the press box, even if I'm not on deadline writing it, you have to know what you're looking at. I mean, I still have my scorebooks.
Exactly. Do you go to the game with the scorebook?
I have my score. Not only do I have my scorebooks, I still have my scorebooks in the days when we were, you had to go get the newspaper the next day, and then you would, you'd glue the box score to the,
Sure.
to the score. So the next day, so you saw, you knew what was happening, and you could track, your stats and everything before everyone was doing the stats for you. Yeah, and then when I go to a game, you have to keep score.
Exactly.
So you can pay attention to what's happening. It's the only way.
I was late to coming to this, but in the last couple of years, it's almost impossible to watch a game and stay involved without scoring it.
I know people who score games when they're listening on the radio and watching at home.
That's a bit much.
That's a bit much.
I'm not that far.
I know people who do that. I do not do that.
Yeah, that's a bit much.
Because it's a bit much. But that's why. That's where the old radio phrase comes from. 6-3 if you're scoring at home.
Let me ask you this really quickly, and we'll jump into the mass topics of what we're going to talk about. But over the years and years of scoring baseball games, are there plays now today that still trip you
up? There are two things that I hate the most. That I absolutely loathe because it just messes up your rhythm. One, please do not bat around in an inning. It messes up the columns. Do not bat around. Just straight down. Score your 6 runs, but when the 9th guy, make that out. Because now I got to make 2 columns for the 3rd inning. And now you got to change all the different columns. That's the first thing. The second thing is, please, like, if the scorebook says if it's a 12-inning scorecard, just play the 12. What am I going to do with extra innings? I got to go get another one, and I got to line everything up to make it all fit. So do not play any 18-inning games, please.
Oh my God! Yeah, the World Series
can't have that. And then, of course, the other thing that messes you up, the one thing that does mess you up, and you have to really pay close attention to it, is stolen bases.
Oh,
because you have to, when you're keeping score, you got to, when you're trying to mark that somebody stole a base, you also have to mark who was at bat when that base was stolen. So you got to make sure you make that little notation as well.
That is true. So look, you're right. Those are two things. I did not score the World Series because I was watching at home, so I would have been in real tough shots between not just the 18 inning game, but game 7 as well. So
yeah, you should see my scorebooks from 03 and 04. Those Red Sox Yankee games. My goodness.
Well, look, we are going to talk about a couple of things. It is February 17th, and we all woke up to the news of the passing of Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
It is hard not to read your book and then think about the fact that we're not, in this day's society, my son's 11 years old. He's not going to fully understand what a Jesse Jackson meant to American society. He's just not. Over the weekend, we were watching a Andrew Young documentary that showed over the weekend. And it was like, it's hard for him at 11 years old to understand kind of the movements that those gentlemen were in. When you just, we don't want to belabor the point, but when you hear about, like, Jesse Jackson passing at 84 and kind of what he represented at a time that was very different in American society today, or maybe not so different, what comes to mind?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is how important he was to me personally. I met the Reverend in 1988 during the 88 campaign when he got 7 million votes and ran for president. I was a sophomore at Temple University, and we went down to DC as part of student leader conference and stuff. And there he was, and he took us to lunch, and we all got to go hang out with the Reverend Jesse Jackson. It was unbelievable. And he just, there were two things about him that I really appreciated. One was the fact that he was so committed to the grassroots, so committed to the movement, so committed to activism. And I remember when we're all sitting around a table, listening to him, and I'll never forget what he told us. He says, when young America moves, all of America moves. And it was just always so inspiring. But then also, as you get older, you also recognize just how much, how much of a threat he was, how many people, he wasn't just a guy out there talking. No. He was a real political force, and a real force of activism as well, a real force, in American history, and where he's been, where he was, and all of that. You had to be there. I mean, and I think one of the things that, to the youth, that you really have to sort of stress upon them is, no matter what people say and no matter what they will tell you, you could have thought that you would put a man on Mars before you could think about a black president.
Right.
And the fact that he was one of the people who really, when he got those 7 million votes in 1998, even though he didn't win the nomination, but that was the first step to saying, you know what, maybe there's a possibility here that you can actually do more. Because no one thought he was going to win. Obviously, Mike Dukakis won the nomination, but
this is 88.
1988. Yeah. My first year voting, I was 19. And that was, that was really the first time when you started thinking that there might be a higher aspiration. And then I met him again. I believe, in 2020.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I met him in 2022. And in a restaurant down in New York, and he came over and waved, and I was like, "You have no idea who I am or remember me," but he gave me the nod and came over and shook hands at the table and went back to his table. And he was infirm at the time. He was sick, you could tell, and I didn't even recognize him because he was so frail. But then you looked at him again, you're like, "Oh yeah, that's Jesse Jackson." And so it's still it came back, and so his aura, is something that you never forget. And then on top of that, it's up to us to make sure that we pass him down to the 11-year-olds and the 21-year-olds like my son, and the people who aren't, if you don't, and that's really what this book was about as well, in a lot of ways, was that if you, who are you as a people if you don't have any agency over your own history?
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate those words. I really do. And I didn't know that there was such a personal touch there when I asked, but I really appreciate your words. And honestly, you just having the opportunity to share that. And it's really, really impactful. Let's talk about Kings and Pawns, because fascinating work. And I mean, just to kind of continue on what you were saying, it's impossible to read this book in 2026 and not compare it to the times we're living in today. It's just impossible. And I'm sure that was intentional. What lessons can we learn, Jackie Robinson, Paul Robeson, in like America? What lessons do you hope people take away from reading this book, and as we compare it to all that's happening right now and in this administration?
Yeah, I thought that the book, while I was working on it, it felt very timely. So much of it felt like today. I think the biggest thing that I had felt going into it was the rediscovery of Robeson. Once again, as we were talking about with Jesse Jackson, this idea once more of not letting our giants disappear, not allowing those giants to be defined by our adversaries, not allowing that history to be written outside of our own story, and also the recognition too that one, all of this history is not that long ago.
No.
Two, it's very present. You can feel it in all of it now.
Sure.
I think one of the other things that I was very cognizant of in working on this was you have a whole bunch of people, and especially a lot of celebrities and a lot of Black comedians, especially, using terms like cancel culture while having full platforms, while having full salary, while being completely present. And then you look at somebody like Paul Robeson, who was actually
canceled. Who was really canceled.
And the word cancel has become trivial.
Yeah.
And to trivialize it was something that was problematic to me, in that you're really talking about today, you're talking about celebrity, powerful people who are actually just being held accountable for doing bad stuff. You do something, you have a transgression, whatever, you pay the price for that. And people today take that as an injustice, that you would actually try to hold me accountable for anything. A real cancellation is what was done to Paul Robeson. Here's a person who had a worldview, who had a belief of what he thought the world should look like, and for that belief had his life upended.
Couldn't work.
That is very, very different.
Yep.
And also, once again, the power of the federal government, and the power of the federal government, the power of the momentum of power. Power takes its own sort of current. And when you get swept up in that current, everybody rides along, and everybody felt really great about watching the Holocaust movies and watching World War II movies. And how could that ever happen? And watching, and yet then you watch it happen. You're like, oh, it's happening right now. It's happening to you in real time, and you're part of it, and you're hopping in the river, and you're caught up in the current. Yeah. So the question of how it can happen, just ask yourself, because you're in the middle of it. All of us, we're in the middle of it right now. So when you say, oh my goodness, how could these atrocities take place while you're like watching the Super Bowl?
Watching the atrocities.
The atrocity is taking place while you're at work, and while you're hanging out with your friends, and while you're spending time with your family, and while you're doing your thing, because it's not hitting you specifically. And so as I try to, say, you don't get it until you get it.
But that's such a big change in American society. And I talk about this often. I strongly doubt that if the civil rights movement happened today, it would have the same impact, because we see images today of people being murdered on the street, and we see images today of an authoritarian state. And there's nothing today where I feel like in, 1964, 65, when you saw the images on TV, it kind of moved a collective conscience that is not moving today. Like
yes and no. I mean, I think that's part. I think that's, I see what you're saying. I understand what you're saying in terms of people being completely desensitized to things, and they are, and nothing sticks.
No.
Like that to me is the real issue. People are outraged by things, but nothing sticks. Very few things stay. And the reason why I tend not to agree with you so much on that is because You saw what happened with Ferguson. People did activate, people did move. There were people in the street. You saw what happened very briefly with the Kaepernick movement. You saw what happened when, when George Floyd, we witnessed a murder.
Mm.
And you saw what changed. You saw there were people in the street. The question was that for how long, and what is the coordinated backlash to those movements?
Right.
And so people are still moving. The question really is at what level and how savvy we've gotten. And we're also more comfortable. Like, you have the people who are the most comfortable, the ones who need to be the least comfortable. Like, you got a 70-inch TV downstairs. So how oppressed can you feel? Right? You actually have the material things. You get to get on, air travel is not a luxury anymore. Air travel is basic for most people. We've all been on airplanes, which is not the same in 1960, where there was a real gap in terms of the actual raw living arrangement, the actual raw living condition. That forces people to move. It's very, very different when you feel comfortable.
Mm.
It's like you don't go hungry. Like when somebody says, you're not hungry enough. You're literally not hungry.
True.
It's very different when your refrigerator is full.
Given that,
so those things
because I'm hard on kind of the modern day athlete in many ways. Do you think, given what you're saying, do you think people like me are too hard on athletes to be like, no, man, you are not following in the tradition of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Muhammad Ali or?
Well, I think it's important to remember. I think it's really important to remember two things. One, even then, those athletes were special. There was Bill Russell and there was Jim Brown and there was Ali, but it wasn't like it was all of them. Those guys were special because they were so unique and they were so isolated. So that's the first thing. And, in this project, the isolation of Jackie Robinson is one of the reasons why I wanted to do the book. We spend so much time talking about April 15th, 1947 as the moment that everything changed. Everything didn't change. Jackie was by himself in a lot of ways. Even though there were other Black players out there, Jackie was really by himself because
you wrote in the book that they were not on Jackie's
That's right. He was willing to talk about things and willing to be, willing to feel them and express them in ways that the other players just didn't. Not that they didn't feel them, but the expression was different. He was a singular personality. And so I think that's the first thing to remember. The second thing to remember is how overmatched these athletes are. It's important to think about how the responsibility that is placed on these players is simply a byproduct of, or mostly a byproduct of, the fact that sports, when I wrote The Heritage in 2018, the point that I was trying to make in that book is that the Black athlete is the most visible, the most influential, and the most successful Black employee this country has ever created. It's ever produced. That's why there's all this responsibility on a guy who hits a ball with a stick.
Mm-hmm.
He shouldn't have that responsibility, and she shouldn't have that responsibility in the first place. We don't, the white athletes don't need their athletes to provide that space for them or to provide that leadership for them. And the space that you're in right now, these players are so well compensated. The question that I asked at the end of The Heritage and into the book I did later, Full Dissidence, in 2020, you ask a very important question, which to me is, what happens when the protester becomes the power? How long can the LeBron Jameses of the world and the rest of them and these super rich athletes, how long can they consider themselves, if they even consider themselves, athletes and moguls at the same time? Right? You just can't do it. It's untenable. And I think one of the interesting things about this heritage and where these athletes are, when you're talking about this tradition, it's splintered off. And it's splintered off from a grassroots activism to a corporate position.
Mm-hmm.
So if Jaylen Brown buys a basketball team or invests in a soccer team, we call that activism. That's not activism. That's business.
That's business.
But we're
Capitalism.
so starved because we're not in those rooms that those are treated as political victories. They're treated as activist victories when it's simply just capitalism.
It's interesting because it's a point and a theme that comes up. I think it comes up in the book as well. It's like there's a big difference between integration and equality. And
well, that's right.
When we got integration, and then they were fighting for equality, which possibly still to this day never came.
Well, we've never had integration. I mean, it's really true when you think about it. We've had assimilation. We've had a handful of us, myself included, certainly, whose families moved us into, predominantly white communities, or we've had opportunities to be in the corporate world at a small number at a small number. And once that number gets bigger, they retreat.
They get out.
They get out. They move on to something else.
They move to the next thing.
That's right. That's right. So one of the things that Robeson recognized when he was a teenager in the teens was that white society was far more comfortable with charity than equality. We'll hand you this. We'll feel good about ourselves allowing you and you because you're exceptional and you're exceptional, but we are not equals.
No.
And I love the fact that Robeson demanded that equality, that he demanded that equality of respect, as did Jackie, when Jackie would talk about first-class citizenship. It's so interesting that these two men had such similar worldviews while being still very disparate. They were very, very different people politically, very, very different people in terms of their worldviews. But yet there were similar threads there that tied them together, which is the story of Black America. And I think one of the things that interested me about this project is that so many times we take Black history and we move it to the side. We other it by even giving it the adjective, Black history, as if it's not history. And the beauty of this project for me when I was conceiving of it was that nobody would associate the Cold War with Black history. It's simply one of many, many Cold War stories or Cold War era stories that happen to center two extremely prominent African Americans. So
I'm going to be honest.
It placed Black people in the center of a story that was not pushed to its own column.
And I'm going to be honest, I'm now in my late 40s, and the sense is that part of the book, the Cold War part, was still really kind of hard for me to grasp. I felt like I was grasping it almost conceptually, in the sense of like communism, maybe. Now, I understood the FBI files and that stuff, but the actual existential threat that especially white America felt from communism, it almost felt like what we do today with like domestic terrorist. Right? Like something happens and the first thing you're going to do is like label them a domestic terrorist or a terrorist. So everybody knows that they're evil. And
well, how different is that from today?
No, that's what I was saying. That's like that's my compare. But that part was the fact that it was so prevalent throughout the life of Paul Robeson and Jackie Robinson, just this kind of overlooming Cold War communism is the blanket thing you could put on someone to say that they are not like us.
Well, that's right. And I think that is one of the things that was really important. I think when you're working on a project in terms of themes, you're thinking about it in terms of how many different ways can this fail? What do I have to have, right? What does this book have to make it relevant? What do I have to find the material and have the skill to convey? And to me, the biggest thing that I had to convey was the feeling in 1945 to 1950s and 60s, and really that period from say 1945 to about 1961. The feeling that this country was being infiltrated by the subversive element, by a foreign government, which sounds familiar today as well, by the foreign government, and that these people were not even human. Like this idea that the Soviet Union was using mind control with the Manchurian Candidate and the rest of these types of popular culture references to convey an attitude that there was a subversive element and that you did not know who of your neighbors were part of it, and that your government wanted or demanded that you declare loyalty to it, and that your job made you declare, which is supposedly illegal, by the way,
Right.
that that you are not part of this subversive element, that you're not a communist, to demand that you do this as a condition of employment,
Right.
as a condition of being in the society, that your political beliefs or your world beliefs are subject to government scrutiny. That runs completely counter to everything that this country supposedly stands for. And yet it happened.
Yep.
And the criminalizing of it, and you look at the actual laws that were passed at that time, and that were updated, whether it was the Smith Act or the McCarran Act, and all of these different bills have a very similar blueprint to what we're going through today. Listen to the language, the enemy within.
It feels very eerie. Very eerie.
Exactly, the radical left scum, right? All of these different things that are coming from the government.
Yep.
And the closing of the borders, which is no different than this Security Act of 1950. And who are you closing the borders to? Predominantly Black minority countries.
There's even checklists today about traveling internationally that sometimes
That's
people
right.
have to fill out in order to be able to travel.
That's right. And so all of these things, it's just the history repeating itself. And it is a specific blueprint with a specific link to it, because Donald Trump was, learned his trade from Roy Cohn, who was Joseph McCarthy's attorney. And so it's not just an allegory or metaphorical. It's real. Those connections are real. And so so working on the book was it felt very present. Let's put it that way.
Let me ask you this, because there is a part of the book towards the end that I just thought was fascinating. And it was basically, I think it's where we get the title from, right? Kings and Pawns. And there's a part of the book where you're listing who people thought kings were and who people thought pawns were. And it was based completely off like the individual perspective of who that person was. They thought this person was a king, this person was a pawn, this person was a king, this person was a pawn. And when you finish a project like this, it just strikes me like maybe Malcolm X, El Hajj, El Shabazz, possibly is correct, because he's like, blame everyone.
Blame everybody.
Everyone for being allowed to be pawns in this system.
But that's what this book is about. Sure. I mean, this is the point. It does go back to Du Bois, that idea of two-ness, this idea of, is it possible for a Black person in this country to be a patriot, a citizen, while still having the massive critique of the country? And also, when you know that so many of the elements in the country don't believe in you, that they view you as the subversive. You're the one who is the un-American element, and you keep trying to prove to them that you're not. So the first Jackie Robinson and Paul Robeson interaction, even though they never met, but why are they tied together, is because the House Un-American Activities Committee in July of 1949, they're holding hearings essentially to prove Black loyalty. That's what those hearings are all about. And
so frustrating.
Exactly. So you have to go to Congress in front of an Un-American Activities Committee to prove that you were loyal to the place that you were born in. And so that immediately puts you on the defensive.
Sure.
And that immediately puts you in that othered category. And so that's the first thing. So more than anything else, the question is, to Malcolm's point, struggling for an attention, a love, a respect that they're never going to give you, that you're not going to have. That why are you in this position? Because you need respect from them and they're not going to give it to you. And Jackie, on the other hand, was like, no, this is mine. I was born here. I'm putting a stake in the ground here. This belongs to me, whether they give it to me or whether they don't, whether they think I'm a citizen or whether I'm not, I am a citizen. Whether they think I'm loyal or I'm not, I am loyal. Whether they want me to be able to have the opportunity to live next door to them or not, or have a nice house, I'm entitled to these things. And that requires an incredible amount of strength.
Strength, courage, and nobility.
Courage.
But there's also the part of me that is like, you're living by a code that white supremacy doesn't live by. And I think he gets burned by this code.
He gets burned by the code. And that was the sort of the thread of the book, was how do these two American giants. And by the way, Robeson believes in that code as well. When I was working on the peak skill chapter, I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this man is putting himself in danger. He is putting his life on the line because of his belief in America, because of his belief that we do not act like this and this is not who we are, and that regardless of what you think of me, I have the right to feel what I feel and to perform. Somebody else might have been like, yeah, I'm not going up there. They're going to kill me. They tried to kill me already. I'm not going back up there. Right? It's like, okay, well, there's reality and then there's theory. And this is the reality is that these people don't live by this code. That these codes of democracy and freedom and self-reliance, that they don't apply to us. They apply to each other, but they don't apply to us. And that was the beauty of both Robeson and Robinson, is that the demand that they apply to us. And I always felt like the power of this narrative was that demand. And then, of course, when you talk about that disillusionment, and then as you go further on, Jackie reaches a point where he's not sure if it's all worth it, except for one thing: it's always worth it. Because that was when you go through, you can feel Jackie's disillusionment that maybe he signed on with the wrong team when he campaigned for Nixon in 1960. And maybe testifying against Robeson wasn't the best move. And now by the mid-60s, he's realizing that the Republican Party does not care about civil rights and that they are anti-Black. And he's one of the guys who believed in these people. But yet at the exact same time, he never checked out. So when there's still an opportunity for change, when there's an opportunity to help people, when there's an opportunity to try to move things forward for other people, not himself, for other people, Jackie's right there. When baseball is holding when Curt Flood sues baseball, where's Jackie? Jackie's in support of Curt Flood. He always stayed in the fight. And that to me was, both of them. The spirit and the strength, they're our kings. And that's where part of that's where half of the title comes from.
You just mentioned, and it is true, there was not direct interaction between Robeson and Robinson. What do you think a late statement, if both of them were later in their lives, what do you think a conversation between those two men would be like?
I have no idea. I mean, it's such an impossible question because of the times changing as much as they did.
Right.
And also because, like it or not, I mean, I don't know. I think that both of them understood each other as Black men. And I think that and Robeson said it in 49, that Jackie, was asked to do something by his employer. And he said that, I have no quarrel with Jackie Robinson, but he has committed a profound political act. In other words, they used you, right? And so, and you allowed yourself to be used by these people who do not want you to have rights. And then secondarily, I'm sure Jackie would wonder about Robeson's political and economic theory on socialism and communism, etc. This idea, and once again, that Robeson was someone who was talking about these issues in the 20s and the 30s about wealth inequality and the 99% against the 1%. He's using the same terms that the Occupy movement is using in 2011. And so I'm sure that both of them would find common ground between them, because the thing that did tie them together is that they were both very prominent Black men in a place where the expectation was that their talent exempted them from all the difficulties of the rest of us.
No, that's a good point. And it draws me back to earlier in the book, the Landis meeting that Robeson was kind of used as a prop for, right? That you talked about. But so am I reading this? Oh, go ahead.
To tamp down protest.
Right.
I mean, they bring Robeson in there because the Black newspaper associations are protesting with the Double V campaign. And so they bring in Robeson to say, see, we're not racist.
But he kind of pulled the okie doke on him, right?
And he sure did. And he was like, well, don't try to separate me from these newspaper people. These are my brothers as well. We're the same. That's the first thing. The second thing that Robeson did in that meeting that I thought was so sort of fascinating was he's the hottest commodity in the country at that time.
Yeah, biggest star.
He integrates Broadway. Othello is a smash hit. And in a lot of ways, he's essentially saying, he's foreshadowing what's going to happen with Jackie Robinson, like the real fear of integration. And the real fear is that if you let this man play baseball, and if he can be on the same field as white players, if they can win together, if they can lose together, if they can travel together, if they can eat together, if they can be traded for one another, then why can't they go to school together? And why can't they live next door to each other? And why can't they do all the other things, right? That's the fear. And Robeson is essentially saying this in this meeting with Landis in 1943. We're already doing this on Broadway. And the world hasn't collapsed. Not only has the world not collapsed, but it's a hit. People love it. Tough. And that was the thing about Robinson that I found that I really, really wanted to explore was we spend a lot of time in the mythology of Branch Rickey and the mythology of the story of integration. Nobody has had their story unchallenged, go unchallenged for as long and as severely as Branch Rickey. Branch Rickey's story of integration is the story of integration. When the truth of the matter is that the owners saw Rickey as betraying them in the deepest sense.
Absolutely.
That this was, that you are destroying our business. And we talk about Jackie on April 15th, 1947, because of how he made us feel, especially a lot of the young white fans in Brooklyn, that this was a revelation for them. And, you know, and you read all the books about Jackie and how Jackie made people feel, but what they don't talk about is the price on him. And they'll say he died at 53, yes, and that, you know, his hair was white and he was, you know, struggling physically in the whole thing. But what they don't talk about is that everyday, day by day physical toll. And that's what I was trying to get at, that the reason why baseball did not want him wasn't because he could play, wasn't because they didn't think he could play, it was because he could.
Yeah.
And that the existential crisis for them was Black people are going to come watch him play. Yeah. And if Black people come to watch him play, white fans aren't going to come watch him play because they don't want to sit next to Black fans.
This was the first book I've ever read that part of it. Even with all of the documentaries I've seen, I've never, because you would think it's a business windfall, but it was the first book where you're like, look, if all of these brothers come, white people ain't gonna be coming to the stadium, and
they say it.
Yep.
The success of one Negro in 1946. They write this in the report to the commissioner. the success of one, especially in the predominantly black cities of Baltimore and Newark, etc., threatens our business.
And wasn't, I mean, I've heard this
That
stat. I
is, I'm
believe
sorry,
it's
but that
true.
is an example right there of this idea of American, one, the idea of American exceptionalism.
Sure.
And two, the overemphasis of money. That, oh yeah, well, once you start making money, then everyone's going to get in line. They didn't want your money. They would rather lose than have your money.
And correct me if I'm wrong. You would know this probably better than I do, but I was under the impression, based off of the things I read, that both Brooklyn and Cleveland financially were more successful during those times because
Yeah, when you look at the attendance, it
yeah,
went up and then
yeah,
it leveled off once they started winning. But that wasn't the point.
yeah, no, absolutely. You already said the point is they don't want your money.
They don't want
That
your
was the
money.
thing. Let me ask this. I know, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Black Baseball Mixtape. I'm already so wrapped up in this, but I got our guy HB Howard Bryant in the building, and we're talking about kings and pawns, but I do have to be remiss if I don't mention 11 books. I think I don't know if I read all of them. I read most of them. They're all fantastic, and now award-winning producer on wonderful projects. So I got a lot to talk to you about, but look, we'll close out the last couple rounds with this because in reading this book, you really did shatter my narrative or hopes, if you will, on certain people that I didn't really have like looks into. But post reading this book, let me tell you who I was like, man, left this book feeling tough about these individuals. Top of the list might be Harry Truman. I was like, bro, what? I was like, because again, you hear Truman integrates the military and Truman, and I'm like, yo, this Truman is different than I expected. You mentioned Branch Rickey, bro, like a lot of Branch Rickey stuff, I think is right. I'm just talking, just changing my opinion, if you will. I'm a Virginian. Thurgood Marshall is revered here, obviously for Roy Wilkins, Walter White, and Thurgood Marshall. I'm like, sometimes I understand some of it, but sometimes I'm like, come on, guys. And
Yeah.
then you mentioned later the O'Malley family, but you mentioned Ruth Shipley as well, which is just a fascinating. I don't think the common person knows.
I never heard of Ruth Shipley until I started working on this.
So, I mean, again, you don't have to take all of these, but I was just floored by.
Well, let's go one by one. We can just do a very quick speed round. So essentially, we'll just put the black establishment in one umbrella. So Walter White, Roy Wilkins, Thurgood Marshall. Yeah, they're the black establishment. They are trying to create something. They are pioneers. They are directly in the movement of trying to secure black rights.
Sure, brilliant men,
right. And these are frontline figures. However, they're also building an organization.
Yeah.
And in building the organization, you have to have, a certain philosophy and a certain mindset and a toughness that comes with it. And that mindset is that we're going to be the singular voice. And they were very much, the NAACP was very much in adversarial relationship with the Communist Party. Mm. And that goes back to the Scottsboro case, the Scottsboro Boys case in the 1930s. Mm. And so they never trusted the communists. Mm. The Communist Party was very much talking about integration and talking about black equality. But the propaganda battle at that time was that these guys don't care about this. They're using black people because racism is the vulnerability of the country. And at the same time, you had a lot of the communists going, well, no, you don't understand. We're actually more in support of this than we're the only white people in support of black liberation. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the first things, is that the tension between the Communist Party as a source of black liberation, which goes into the economics of it as well, that this is the pathway which Robeson believed in. He believed in democratic socialism. He believed in socialism, that capitalism was going to destroy black people. And so you've got the establishment NAACP. And by the way, the NAACP is not a black organization. It is an interracial organization.
Interracial organization, yes.
And so the attitude is that, look, if you're Thurgood Marshall, especially because of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and the attack on legal segregation, which is his life's work, we can't be associated with the enemy. And that, Paul Robeson, you are making this extremely difficult for us. How are we supposed to convince these people, these average white Americans and these powerful white Americans and these patrons and benefactors, how are we supposed to convince them to believe in us when you have put us on the other side of the global conflict? And that the Du Bois and Robeson side of the world believed in this Pan-Africanism, that they believed that the Black struggle was a global struggle. And the NAACP was like, yeah, that very well may be, but we've got our issues right here. This has to be a domestic battle. So this is a story about tactics. And they were upset personally, and they loved Robeson at first, and they loved the fact that Robeson would raise money for the NAACP, and he would be there and do things for the Urban League and all of that. But they also felt like, listen, we're cleaning up your messes. You're out there giving speeches and talking about Stalin, and we're paying the price. So there was real animosity and anger there. But that's also a very interesting point, and it's its own book, really.
It really is.
Because you're talking about economics. And the economics of it is, and you see it when you go into the 1960s and the 1970s. Look at the Black movement. So much of the Black Power movements are rooted in democratic socialism, are rooted in Marxism, that when you look at the raw numbers in terms of net worth, it's like the Malcolm X line, show me a capitalist and I'll show you a racist. This system is inherently we can't win in this system. And so you look at the Fred Hamptons and Angela Davises, and you look at what are their economic philosophies. They're much more leftist. They're anti-capitalist. And the NAACP is a capitalist organization. And so that was the tension. And obviously, when you start getting into the FBI files, you can't be. It's very, very difficult when the State Department is telling you, we need you to destroy this man. And you're trying to pander to them to let them know that once again, it's this proving that you're an American thing. Silence could have been an option, but it really wasn't, because you got J. Edgar Hoover in the State Department saying, we need your help. And the attitude was, well, we can isolate. If we isolate Robeson, will you leave us alone? So it really is a question of tactics. And that is the piece of this that I found so fascinating, was that by the time you get to the early 1950s, and you start getting into the beginning of the modern day civil rights movement, these very Black people who are going out of their way to isolate Robeson because he's the communist, to prove their Americanism, the minute they get Brown versus Board of Education, the minute they start asking for black rights, now they're the ones being called communists.
Absolutely.
And so, and that is the Malcolm X point, that you're all pawns.
You'd mentioned, like I said, we'll go quickly as we close out, but I do got to ask you about just the relationship. I don't know if it's a great misconception, because I don't know how many people in our community really look at the Truman era. But again, my conception of President Truman versus what is in the book is vastly different.
Well, it's a very flattened out conversation. Well, you figure that, well, once again, it's not that different from Branch Rickey. Branch Rickey integrated baseball, therefore a good guy, right? Well, maybe not.
Maybe
right?
not.
And so in Truman's case, Truman and Rickey are similar to me because they both did the thing. So they're complicated characters in that regard, is that they both did the thing. So say what you want about Branch Rickey. He is the one, when the other 15 owners were like, no, we're not going to integrate. He did put Jackie Robinson at first base on April 15th, 1947. He did the thing. For whatever reasons, that door opened. But Truman, on the other hand, Truman did the thing as well in terms of integrating the military and integrating the, getting rid of the segregation, customs in Washington. He did the thing, but he did the thing because he wanted to put down the further, the left wing part of the Democratic Party.
Yep.
He wanted to. It was politics. It was him and A. Philip Randolph and a lot of the black leadership against Henry Wallace and Robeson, and that they thought that the more liberal pieces of the party, which would now today be the AOC Bernie Sanders wing of the party, that they didn't want to be associated with communism, that they were the commies, and that if we do this for black people, will we win their vote? It was purely political. And very sharp political movement, very sharp political acumen, even though Truman in the 1948 campaign does not mention civil rights at all when speaking to white audiences. Right? He won't talk because he knows it's bad politics and he's going to lose. But on the other hand, he does the thing. He's the first president to campaign in a black neighborhood.
It was Harlem, you said,
he's
right?
The first,
like
he's the
floods
first
the street.
one. He's exactly. There's a photo of him driving down, in a motorcade.
Right.
And so for black people, it's like he's our guy.
Oh.
So it's pure in a lot of ways, like, and that's why these things have to be discussed, because they are complicated, they are uneven, and it's the piece of it that makes human beings so fascinating in a lot of ways. All right, he did say what you want about him. He didn't like black people. He didn't respect black people at all. But he also understood that from a political, how do I win? Right? How do I win? I need this block of people to vote for me. So what am I going to do? And he did two things. One, he got the black vote that has been with the Democratic Party ever since.
Yep.
And then the second thing he did was by usurping the civil rights piece of that campaign from the Progressive Party, from the Henry Wallaces and from the Paul Robesons. They didn't, they were out of the race. He beat them. And he was more satisfied with knocking out Wallace than he was with beating Dewey and beating the Republicans.
Ugh.
And so it's very cynical. And once again, that's who's the pawn there? Us. Right? Us. But
history, like the way that we think about it.
That's right. But at the same time, the thing got done.
It did. HB, as we close out, this has been fantastic. I could do this all day, but you have been very generous with your time.
Fine. We can go for a few more. It's good.
A couple of silly questions as we conclude here. Do you believe Jack Roosevelt Robinson is Jackie Robinson's real name?
It's not what I believe. It's not. That was the other piece that I was like, for real? That was one of the biggest revelations in the book. It was like, that's not his real name. Then I went into the census. His name is Roosevelt Robinson. And Mac Robinson, his name is Matthew Robinson. Where did these nicknames come from?
That's what I was like, is it one of those things where later in life, like Marvelous Marvin Hagler, he officially changed his name to Marvin Hagler?
And nobody haven't discovered, where did Jack come from? Like, where did who gave him that nickname? He was born Roosevelt Robinson.
Look,
I had never known that until the Mac Robinson piece in Ebony.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating because I was at the Jackie Robinson Foundation doing some research. They didn't know.
Oh man!
I would now I got to go find his birth certificate.
I was in awe reading some of this stuff, and not just that, but so many things in Kings and Pawns. Fantastic piece of work, HB. Everybody should definitely buy it, check it out. I've got the trifecta. I've got the hard copy, the Kindle, and the audio book, which is fascinating. Because
you've got more than I do.
I wanted to get it done and get ready as much as possible. And I love listening to it in the car. It's fantastic. You don't read your own audiobooks. Why is that?
The biggest reason?
Why would I?
Why would I? I mean, and they don't pay you to do it.
No.
It's double the work. And there are professionals who are reading, and J.D. Jackson did a terrific job on my last two books. He's fantastic. Great. Fantastic. That's his world, not my world. Now, the one book that I did really consider reading was Full Dissidence, because that was such a personal book to me. That's the only first-person book that I've ever written. That one was the one where it's like, okay, if you're gonna do it, that's the one you should read, because it's in your voice, and it's not sort of third-person history narrative. It's you writing about your feelings on the world.
Pitchers and catchers are here. It is spring training is getting underway. WBC is getting underway. What are you looking forward to the most in 2026 when you approach a baseball season?
Labor.
That's 2027, right?
Yeah, but all the battles taking place now.
Yeah.
So obviously it's the juxtaposition for me. It's the fact that, I don't know about you, I have seen probably my first World Series. It's probably 75.
Okay.
It's the one I remember. Obviously I'm a Bostonian. Sox, Reds, it's everything. It's one of the greatest World Series of all time. But it is. What can you do? And however, in thinking about what we saw last year's World Series, is one of the best, if not the best, World Series I've ever seen.
That one's in my lifetime.
That was the greatest. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
In terms of, they were Toronto was so close, and the Dodgers were the Dodgers, and it was one of the, to have back-to-back games on the road and with double plays.
Yep.
Game 6 and Game 7. I mean, you're this far away from winning the championship. And so, to me, to come out of that and to not feel as wonderful as you could possibly feel about baseball. Like, that was what baseball was all about. That is the best of what the sport has to offer. And so, to me, coming into the 2026 season on anything other than a high, to me, is a missed opportunity. I mean, this is what the game is.
Right.
And so we're just going to see if these guys find a way to blow it and have us talking about, labor and everything else, because they don't realize how good they've got it, or that we're all playing a different game. We're watching the game on the field. They're watching the game on the balance sheet. Two different sports.
That is true. And I know, because the narrative has been, you are a baseball organization. Your job is you try to win. And if you spend, you're going to spend to win. But we've had long discussions on the Black Baseball Mixtape. Are the Dodgers ruining baseball?
No.
Is this awful?
Absolutely not. It's great. It's great. I mean, however, I am a conspiracy theorist, and that from the standpoint that I think the Dodgers are also taking one for the team. I think the Dodgers are forcing this in toward the salary cap. It doesn't hurt them. It doesn't hurt them either way. If they spend, they're gonna win, right?
Right.
If they end up getting a salary cap, and the players finally sort of give in, the Dodgers are still the Dodgers. People are still going to want to play for them because it's LA. It's the Dodgers. They still have every free agent advantage with or without a salary cap. Can they offer more money without a cap? Absolutely. Is the franchise value going to skyrocket with a salary cap? Absolutely. They just bought the Lakers for $10 billion.
Yep.
And they just, they bought that team in 2012 for $2.1 billion. Yeah. If you add cost certainty and you tamp down salaries, how much of the Dodgers are going to be worth $20 billion?
You just mentioned, that's a whole nother podcast. We talk about what private equity is doing to buying some of these teams, especially in the minor leagues and the youth levels. It's insane. AL East, really quickly, on paper, should be the best division in baseball, right? Like,
it always is.
It always is. I'm an Orioles fan. I love the Pete Alonso.
Condolences. I was talking about this not too long ago. I was saying how, and by the way, just so you know, you don't have to call me whenever I write a book. If you want to just talk baseball, call me. Come on,
we can do it anytime.
Right?
You're a busy man. You're a busy man. I don't. Yeah, I'm not that busy. I want to respect your time.
Right. So you could write the history. You couldn't write the history when I was a kid of the NFL without the Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
I mean, it was Dolphins, Steelers, Raiders in the AFC. They were the whole damn sport, right? I mean, they dominated everything.
Yep.
The Baltimore Orioles are the Miami Dolphins of baseball. That there was a period from 1966 to 1983 where you could not write the history of the American League without the Orioles. I mean, they were right there with the Yankees in terms of wins and losses and winning percentage. And then they've disappeared. And so at some point, like there's only, I think they are one of like 7 teams. They're only one of 7 teams that hasn't been to the World Series in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only been everybody else has been. So that's why when you're talking about the Dodgers ruining baseball, take a 30-year perspective. Baseball actually has more of its teams play for a championship than the other sports.
Yeah, the random Nats year, the Royals,
the Braves, in there. The Royals went back to back. The Giants have 3 titles.
Yeah, the Giants.
And so, so when people want to talk about this, it's like narratives take on a certain momentum. Yeah. And then they want that momentum to become fact because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We can't win. Can you win? Like, all right, the Dodgers are $400 million into the luxury tax, but you don't need a $600 million payroll to win a baseball game.
It doesn't hurt though.
It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't have to be that much. I mean, if we're really telling the truth, the Pirates should be ashamed of themselves.
They should be ashamed. The Pirates are an embarrassment. They're an embarrassment.
But the Pirates are also, but are the Pirates profitable? Absolutely.
But
and they're not trying to win.
Yeah.
And so you can make the argument, and I've never agreed with this idea that the Dodgers are ruining baseball or that spending is ruining baseball. Spending is ruining, your bottom line if you don't want to spend, but that's not my problem. My job or my interest in this, if you're a fan, is whether or not the ownership group is putting your team in a position to win. My job's not to save you money.
Nope.
That's why I love Dave Dombrowski. Dave Dombrowski will spend every dollar you got, but your team's going to win.
Is there a player right now in modern day baseball that you stop? Like, I'm going to stop what I'm doing to watch this guy play.
Well, I mean, obviously there are 2 who are above and beyond.
Right.
Ohtani and Judge. Yeah. I mean, what they're doing is ridiculous. But you also have to sort of enjoy watching them play. I enjoy watching Ohtani play. I still enjoy watching Mookie Betts play.
Yep.
Even though I have no idea why he's an infielder now. That doesn't make sense to me, but that's their call. I mean, there are still players that I enjoy watching. I am not so cynical as to say that the game doesn't hold my attention anymore. It still does.
Absolutely. HB, we're going to have to leave it here.
There it is.
Fantastic. And this has been a pleasure. This has been an absolute pleasure. The book, ladies and gentlemen, Kings and Pawns, Jackie Robinson and Paul Robeson in America. Make sure you check it out. This has been fantastic. Make sure you follow. It's Howard Bryant Books, right?
It is.
On social. Make sure you follow. An amazing, and he gets very feisty on Threads. Make sure you follow on Threads.
I do.
Not that feisty, but very, very good follow. This is the Black Baseball Mixtape. If you like this, please subscribe. We're over on Substack now, and we'll catch you next time.